Eddie Mora wants to be a writer. He has been living for the past few months on an advance from a book contract and money from his girlfriend. He hasn't written a single word of his book, which seems to be the only problem. He has a hard time writing his story because he keeps writing, deleting, and starting over. He spends the afternoons drinking at a bar or wasting time on his couch in a messy apartment. Eddie's fiancée Lindy decides to break up with him because she thinks he can't get his life in order. Lindy says she hasn't seen Eddie make any progress, and because her career is going well, she can't take care of Eddie all the time. Eddie tells her he loves her and wants to spend the rest of his life with her, but Lindy leaves. A man named Vernon calls out to him as he walks home. He is the brother of Eddie's first wife. Eddie remembers that Vernon was Melissa's little brother who sold drugs, but Vernon says he doesn't sell drugs anymore. Vernon asks Eddie to meet him at a bar for a drink and then asks him about his life. Vernon says that Melissa is now remarried and has 2 children. Eddie tells Vernon that he is trying to write a book but is having trouble in writing and being creative. Vernon offers to help and takes a small pill out of his pocket and gives it to Eddie. Eddie refuses, saying Vernon is still dealing. Vernon says the pill is legal and even has been tested and approved by the FDA and will be sold in coming year. He can get it early because he works for the company that makes it. It is called NZT. Eddie is not convinced, saying that he knows drug when he sees one. Vernon says that the pill helps unlock formant receptors in the brain, allowing them to use 100% of brain power. Vernon gets a very important phone call, so he gives Eddie his card. Eddie doesn't want to take the pill, but Vernon keeps pushing him, saying that a single pill costs $800. He takes the NZT because he thinks that his life can't get any worse than it already is. On his way up, he runs into the wife of his landlord. She yells at Eddie for not giving rent on time and tell him that soon he will be homeless. Eddie can't pay attention to what the woman is saying because the NZT is starting to work. He starts to feel dizzy as the drug finally starts to work and sees that the woman has a law book in her bag. Eddie thinks that the woman doesn't like him and must be upset about something else. When he asks about law school, the woman is surprised that Eddie already knows that she is in law school. Eddie remembers seeing the book in a dorm room when he was still in college. He is now able to remember everything he has ever read, seen, or heard. Eddie then tells her about a different law book that would be better for her assignment and keeps giving her advice about how she could do her assignment. Eddie's sudden knowledge of law and court impresses the woman. She invites her in, and he helps her with her homework. Eventually, they talk to each other. Eddie can't figure out how he suddenly knows all of this. He realizes that he has always known these things, but they were just all over the place in his head. The NZT must have helped his brain reorganize and analyze the pieces of information he has in his head, turning them into well-organized thought that he can now fully access. Everything he has ever read or seen, documentaries, magazine articles, movies, commercials, is now available in a stream of information. He goes back to his dirty apartment and starts cleaning it. He starts writing and ends up with 90 pages manuscript. The NZT not only helped him learn more, but it also gave him boost in motivation. The next day, he feels like the effects of the NZT have worn off. He gives his editor his manuscript. Eddie gets voicemails from his editor praising him when he gets home. Eddie then decides he needs more NZT and goes to Vernon's apartment. When Eddie reaches Vernon's apartment, Vernon knows right away what Eddie wants. Eddie sees that Vernon's face is bruised and scratched and asks him what happened. Vernon doesn't tell him what happened. Vernon then says that he lied when he said that the NZT was legal and approved by the FDA. Eddie still wants more, though. Vernon tells Eddie to go do some tasks, and Eddie agrees because he thinks he'll do whatever it takes to get more NZT. When he gets back to the apartment, the door is already open. Vernon is sitting on the couch with a hole in his head. Eddie calls the police, but he quickly realizes that he needs to find Vernon's stash of NZT before the police arrive. He finds cash and a list of Vernon's clients, as well as a pack of NZT. He gets a call from Melissa while being questioned at the police station. Police tell Eddie that they will keep in touch. Eddie takes another pill at home, and then his ideas start coming to him. He starts working out, and in 4 days he even finishes his book. He learns to play the piano in 3 days and realizes that he can learn any language just by listening to it. He stops being shy and starts being brave. He feels like he can do anything he wants. Eddie has an epiphany and knows right away what he needs to do. Eddie now wants to trade stocks. He meets Kevin, who works as a broker on Wall Street, and he introduces Eddie to the world of stocks. Eddie starts to read about stock trading and keeps an eye on the stock market. He used NZT to turn Vernon's last $800 into $2,000 in 1 day. It goes up to $7,500 the next day. Eddie needs more money to help his business grow, so he goes to a loan shark, Gennady, for help. Gennady decides to lend Eddie the money, but he tells Eddie that he must pay him back on time or bad things will happen to him. Eddie takes the risk because he knows he can pay Gennady back quickly. Eddie goes to Kevin's brokerage firm the next day and starts trading stocks. Eddie's brokerage account grew to more than $2 million in just 2 weeks. Soon, Kevin calls him to tell him that a Wall Street billionaire wants to meet with him. Eddie and Lindy have dinner together that night, and Eddie tells Lindy all about the good things he's been doing with his life. Lindy is happy to see Eddie and he tells her that he suddenly got a wake-up call and decided to get his life in order. They go back to Lindy's place after dinner and make love. Over next few days, the couple remembers how much they love each other, and soon Lindy tells Eddie that she wants to be with him again. As they talk about getting back together, Eddie notices that a man is watching him from some distance. Eddie looks out the window that night to see if he can see the man, but he sees nothing. Lindy is in bed and wants him to join her. Eddie trips and is taken to a different place. He hallway right away. Eddie has no idea how he got out of his apartment, but Lindy sees him and asks him to go inside for dinner. The next day, Kevin and Eddie meet with the Wall Street giant. Kevin is worried about the meeting, but Eddie tells him that everything will be fine. A Wall Street legend named Carl Van Loon shows up, and they start talking. Carl's friend is suspicious of Eddie and how quickly he climbed up the ladder. He thinks it's a trick, but Eddie talks his way through his questions and impresses Carl. Carl gives Eddie a stack of papers about the businesses he owns while they are in the car going home. He tells Eddie to look at them and try to find a pattern. He then asks Eddie what the best move would be. Eddie looks closely and figures out that Carl must be planning a big merger with a rival company. Carl is even more amazed when he realizes that no one could have guessed that in such a short time. Carl gives Eddie a chance to rework the deals between the two companies and asks Eddie to meet him the next day. Eddie accepts the challenge and gets out of Carl's car. He starts walking because he wants to learn as much as he can. Still, he has times when he doesn't remember what's going on and wakes up in different places. He was in different parts of the city and couldn't remember how he got there. He goes to a few parties and clubs by accident, where he meets different women. Eventually, he ends up in a hotel room with a model, where they have sexual relations. Eddie has no idea that the strange man he saw earlier is now following him. Eddie leaves the hotel and goes to the subway. There, he meets a group of bad guys and starts fighting. The NZT helps him remember every self-defense video, action movie, fight scene, and survival documentary he's ever seen, and he beats the group of bad guys all by himself. After that, he starts running. At dawn, he is on top of the Brooklyn Bridge, but he has no idea what happened to him in the last 18 hours. He goes home and goes to bed, but his alarm wakes him up to remind him that he has to meet Carl. Eddie decides not to take an NZT pill because he is afraid that he might lose his memory again. He looks at the files that Carl sent him, but he can't figure out anything. Eddie calls Kevin and tells him that he needs to cancel the meeting, but Kevin says that if he cancels now, he'll never get another chance. Eddie doesn't take NZT before the meeting, so when he gets there, he's less focused, feels dizzy, and even has trouble speaking. Carl sees that Eddie is blurry and asks him about Hank Atwood, a business rival with whom he had planned to merge. Carl says that Atwood was a nobody who rose quickly in the stock trading world. Carl doesn't understand how Atwood got so popular so quickly and is now ready to fight him. Eddie doesn't pay attention to Carl. Instead, he looks at the TV and sees a new report about a woman who was found dead at the hotel. It was the same woman he was with the night before. Eddie stops paying attention and leaves Carl. He goes outside and starts vomiting. When he gets home, Melissa calls him and wants to know more about Vernon's death. Eddie asks her if they could meet up somewhere, and even though she doesn't want to, Melissa says yes. Eddie looks through Vernon's notebook in a park. He calls Vernon's clients to find out more about how NZT affects them. Every time he calls a number, he hears that the person had died. All of them had severe headaches and had vomits, and some of them even went into a coma. Eventually, they all died in the end. He calls another number, and the phone of a man behind Eddie rings. Eddie hears his voice on the other line after he answers. Eddie knows him as the person who had been watching him. It's the same guy who followed Eddie and the model to the hotel. Eddie starts to run, and the man follows him. Eddie runs through the traffic. He finally gets a taxi to the place where he and Melissa are supposed to meet. Melissa tells Eddie that she wasn't surprised by Vernon's death and that she knows what the NZT is. She also took it, but she soon decided to stop. If the brain worked at a high level of mental activity for a long time, it would lead to mental fatigue and burnout. She became afraid and quit taking NZT. She felt lazy and unfocused and had trouble keeping her job. Even though it's been 2 years, the effects still haven't gone away. She tells Eddie that he should stop taking the pill too, but to do so slowly because stopping all at once could kill him. Eddie is going home and runs into Gennady. Gennady beats Eddie up and asks for his money. Eddie drops an NZT pill as they stumble up the stairs to his apartment. Gennady takes the pill himself because he thinks it is some kind of drug. Then they go to the bank, where Eddie gives him the money. Gennady says that the pill made him feel great and that he would soon ask for more. Eddie goes to Lindy's office and passes out there. Eddie has no choice but to tell Lindy everything that's going on. He figures out why Eddie is so motivated, and she agrees to help him get the pills. She goes home, takes the rest of the drugs, and then heads back. She sees the man following him on her way back. She runs into a city park and asks two men for help, but the person who is chasing her stabs both of them and keeps going after Lindy. Lindy hides and calls Eddie. Eddie tells her to take one of the pills because it will give her the strength to get through the situation. She takes the pill and now she knows what to do to get away from the man who is chasing her. She runs into the ice rink while carrying a child. She spins the child around and lets her go. The man's face with the child's ice skates. The man hits the ground, and Lindy runs away. The next day, Lindy talks about her worries about the pill. She says it changed her into a completely different person. Eddie says that as soon as he has enough money, he will stop taking the pill. Eddie sees Gennady following him around on the street. Eddie comes up, and Gennady tells him that he needs more pills. Eddie gives him a few, but he knows that Gennady isn't going to stop. Eddie hires 2 bodyguards because he thinks he needs to be safe all the time. He sees Carl again and says he's sorry for how he acted before, saying he was just sick. Soon, Eddie would be the middleman in what he calls the biggest merger in the history of businesses. Eddie finds out that the blackout stopped when he gets enough sleep, stayed hydrated, and didn't drink alcohol. He has suits made just for him, and each one has a hidden pocket for his NZT. He goes to a chemist and asks him to figure out how the pill works so he can make more of them. He sees the detective who talked to him about Vernon's death while he is having lunch. The detective tells him that Eddie is now a suspect in the death of the model because witnesses saw him at the scene of the crime. Eddie hires Morris Brandt, who is one of New York's best lawyers. Brandt gets him temporary bail by saying that the evidence the police had against him isn't strong enough. Carl and Eddie see Atwood again and notice that his health is getting worse. Eddie points out that Atwood isn't even 60 years old yet. Eddie goes back to his hotel room and finds that someone has broken in. He thinks they are looking for the NZT now that safety is his top priority. He decides to buy a luxury penthouse apartment with the best security system. Later, Eddie runs into Gennady, who is now being watched by some bad guys. Eddie figures out that Gennady must also be on the pill. Gennady tells Eddie that if he doesn't give him 20 more pills, he will kill him like he killed the model. The next day, Carl is worried because he has to sign a contract with Atwood. Atwood is late. Atwood's wife shows up later and tells them that her husband was in pain and had been feeling dizzy and is now in the hospital. She makes it clear that they still want to move forward with the contract as soon as Atwood can. They walk her down, and Eddie sees that the man who had been following him is her driver. That afternoon, Eddie goes with Brandt to the police station. After the lineup, Brandt tells Eddie that he is free to go. When he gets back to Carl's office, he finds that Atwood is now in a coma. He goes to the bathroom to take another pill, but his secret pocket is empty when he gets there. His money is all gone. He goes back to Carl, and someone brings him a package. He opens it and sees his disembodied bodyguard's hands inside. He runs out of Carl's office in shock and goes home quickly. He sees that Brandt is also Atwood's lawyer on a news report about the latest developments in Atwood's case. He finally gets it, and he just couldn't help but laugh. Eddie then hears knocking on his door and sees on the security cameras that Gennady and his thugs are trying to break in with metal grinders and steel cutters. Eddie walks up to the balcony and gets ready to jump because he can't get out of his situation. As his foot slips, he stops and tries to remember if he had even left a single tablet somewhere. He thinks back and remembers that one was left in his old tin container. He looks through the boxes and finds it, but Gennady comes in and Eddie's trips and the pill fell out of the box. Gennady's thugs hold Eddie down, and Gennady shows Eddie how to use NZT even better. He makes it into a liquid and injects it right into his bloodstream. He says it's stronger and lasts longer this way. Eddie looks at his attackers and sees that one of them is blind in one eye. Gennady pulls out a number of medical tools, such as knives, blades, and pliers, in an attempt to force Eddie to give him more NZT. Gennady approaches Eddie while they start grinding into the safe in the next room. Eddie stabs him with a knife. As they fight, Eddie puts the blade into Gennady's chest, killing him. Eddie is on the floor next to Gennady, who is bleeding. He looks at the needle Gennady used to inject the NZT and decides to drink Gennady's blood, hoping to get some of the NZT into him. It works, and his brain starts to do everything it can. He lies down on the floor and waits for the half-blind goon to return. As the goon turns Eddie over, he shoots the needle straight into his eye, making him totally blind. The other bad guy comes in, but Eddie is smarter than them. He hides in a room and uses a TV to fool them and to hit his pursuer over the head. Eddie tries to run away, but a goon catches up to him and chokes him. Eddie kicks him out, and the blind henchman accidentally shoots the other one. The blind henchman then pulls out his gun and tries to shoot Eddie, but Eddie dodges him. They used a piano to push the man into a window. Hank Atwood dies at the hospital. Eddie shows up at the hospital and sits next to the driver. Even though they got the NZT pills for Atwood, he doesn't understand how he died. The driver then helps Eddie find Brandt. Brandt had kept the pills for himself instead of giving them to Atwood, which the driver finds out. They look in Brandt's closet and find the drugs. After a few years, Eddie decides to run for governor. He gets a call telling him that a man from a big drug company is waiting for him in his workplace. When Eddie sees that the man is Carl, he is surprised. Carl tells Eddie that he quit Wall Street a while ago and is now working in the drug industry. Carl tells Eddie that he now knows about NZT and that the drug is made by the company he owns. Carl gives Eddie a steady supply of NZT in exchange for a few favors. Eddie says no to Carl's offer, but Carl tells him that all of the illegal NZT labs have been shut down and told Eddie that they were the only ones making NZT now. Eddie then says that he has stopped taking NZT. He had the drug changed a while ago so that it didn't have any side effects. He took less and less NZT until he didn't need it anymore, but the effects stayed the same. He was always affected by the drug. The changed NZT had changed Eddie's brain patterns in a way that would never go away. Eddie shows that his mind is fully unlocked even when he's not on drugs by predicting that a distracted van driver will hit a car. Carl turns around, and then it happens. Eddie then puts his hand on Carl's chest and says that he can tell his heart has a few problems. Carl tells Eddie that he would be a very dangerous enemy, but Eddie says he doesn't feel threatened. He was always 50 steps ahead.